You need to leave. Today. Those were the words spoken by the son of the man I had lived with for the past 5 years. The same man I had just buried with my own hands the day before. As I clutched my coat and looked around the living room, the room I helped decorate, kept spotless, filled with laughter, every part of me screamed for justice. I wasn't his wife. I didn't have his last name. But what I did have, was something no one could take from me. And on that day, with tears in my eyes and a suitcase in my hand, something inside me came alive. Want to know what gave me the strength to stand up after all that injustice? Stay with me until the end. My name is Joanne Parker. And at the age of 64, I finally understood something. I had never been anyone's priority. Not when I was a wife, where I was more of a cook and a listener than a partner. Not when I was a mother, where everything revolved around everyone else's needs, while mine always came last. Not even when I became a widow, for the second time. In fact, especially then. I spent my whole life being the easy woman. The one who listened more than she spoke. The one who solved problems without complaining. The one who swallowed frogs, silences, and tears, all in the name of keeping the peace. The one who added warmth to the room when she entered. But wasn't missed when she left. And the hardest part. No one ever asked me, "What do you want, Joanne?" Until one day, someone did. Someone I never expected. Samuel. I met Samuel on a chilly spring morning at the local community library. He was struggling to fill out a form and asked if I could help. When I looked into his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in decades. Peace. Not urgency. Not judgment. Not hidden agendas. Just peace. He wasn't the kind of man who made big promises. But he was the only one who delivered on the smallest ones. He remembered exactly how I liked my coffee, 2 spoonfuls of sugar and a dash of cinnamon. He'd fold an extra blanket and leave it on the sofa when the weather turned cold. He left little notes on the mirror that said things like, "Waking up and knowing you're here already makes my day." Or, "Don't forget, you're still light, even when the world tries to dim it." We spent 5 years together. No wedding. No ring. No official paperwork. Just the two of us and a quiet, meaningful life in a small house in interior British Columbia. It was simple. But it was ours. And for a long time, I thought it was enough. Actually, it was more than I ever thought I'd have again. Until he was gone. Too fast. Too silently. His heart, already tired, gave out on a night when the wind howled against the windows. For days after, I swore I could still hear his footsteps on the porch. Even the kettle on the stove seemed to call for him. But he never came back. And the very next day after the funeral, while my eyes still burned and my chest felt like it carried a stone, the world, once again, showed me just how cruel it could be. A sharp knock at the door. On the other side. His son. Rigid posture. Impatient eyes. He barely let me say, "Good morning," before delivering his message, like handing me an eviction notice. "This house belonged to my father. It's not yours." For a moment, I didn't understand. I thought he was confused. Maybe grieving. But he wasn't. He had rehearsed that speech. Cold. Direct. Heartless. But no buts, Miss Parker. No paperwork, no rights. I froze. It felt like I'd been punched in the chest. The words spun in my mind, trying to find a place to land. No paperwork, no rights. Is that all my life with Samuel amounted to? The nights I took care of him. The laughter we shared. The way I held him when he lost his brother. The doctor visits, the soups, the chess games, the classical music afternoons. Did none of that count? Apparently not. Because in this world, if it's not signed, sealed, and notarized, it doesn't exist. And once again, I was invisible. Before Samuel, my life had another name. It was called routine. And it was predictable, heavy, and painfully lonely. Even during a marriage that lasted 32 years, with a man named Robert, a meticulous, well-respected, and successful accountant, I never truly felt like a wife. At best, I was an appendage. A footnote in his perfectly organized life. I cooked. I scheduled his tax clients. I vacuumed the rug before anyone noticed the dust. But no one ever looked at me and saw a person with needs, dreams, or a voice. Robert came with a child, Daniel, 6 years old, from a previous relationship. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, I loved that child like my own. I helped with homework. Cleaned up after fevers. Walked him to school. Taught him how to ride a bike. But you know what I never heard? Thanks, Mom. Not even a happy birthday. To him, I was always just Joanne. As if forming an emotional bond had been forbidden by some unspoken contract. For 32 years, I ran our home. I cared for Daniel. Managed the finances. Supported Robert's career. But no one ever took care of me. Not once. And yet, I stayed. Out of fear. Out of convenience. Out of a belief, shared by so many women of my generation, that this is what love turns into after a few decades. When Robert died, I thought at the very least, I'd be allowed to grieve in peace. In the home I helped build through every quiet sacrifice. But I was wrong. 2 days after the funeral, Daniel showed up at the door. Holding an envelope in one hand and a wall of coldness in his eyes. I need you to vacate the house by the end of the week, he said. What? This is my house. He didn't laugh. He didn't hesitate. This house is in my father's name. Everything is. And there's no will with your name on it. I tried to argue. But talking to him was like yelling into a cave, only my own pain echoed back. There he was. A grown man raised by my love, my effort, my sacrifices. Looking at me like I was some stranger who had trespassed into their perfect little world. You can't do this. I've lived here for decades. There's no proof of that, Joanne. And frankly, that's not my problem. And just like that, he left. And he took my dignity with him. Back then. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I didn't lawyer up. I took what little I could carry, borrowed a friend's car. And I left. I moved to a smaller town in rural British Columbia. Sold old jewelry, clothes I didn't wear, furniture that only whispered of grief. And I started from nothing. I began sewing for other people. Stitching dish towels to sell at local markets. Teaching beginner classes at the church. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. Even if it still hurt. One cloudy afternoon, I went to the community library. And that's where I met Samuel. He was trying to fix the hem of a curtain. Fumbling awkwardly with a roll of tape. Do you sew, ma'am? He asked. I smiled. It had been years since someone called me ma'am with kindness. Instead of condescension. I do, I said. But with thread, not tape. We both laughed. And just like that. The gray sky didn't seem quite so gray anymore. With Samuel, I learned to talk again. To really listen to music. To sit on the porch just to watch the sunset. Not to escape someone's silence, but to embrace my own. With Samuel, for the first time. I wasn't a shadow. I was a presence. But life. As it always did. Tested me one more time. Samuel's funeral was quiet. White flowers. Heavy silence. Familiar faces. And eyes that slid past me like I was part of the carpet beneath their feet. His sons, Elliot and Marcus, stood stiff and expressionless. No hug. No, I'm sorry for your loss. I was there, and yet, somehow, I wasn't. I returned alone to the house that used to be ours. Opened the bedroom window and inhaled the scent still lingering on his pillow. Sat in the armchair he loved. Closed my eyes. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees like a whisper. But inside me, everything screamed. The next morning, still swimming in grief, I heard a knock at the door. Firm. Sharp. Final. A man in a dark suit stood there, holding a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as the legal representative of the Walker family. Good afternoon, Miss Joanne. I'm here on behalf of the late Mr. Samuel Walker's sons. I tried to smile, assuming this had to do with funeral arrangements or legal paperwork. But before I could even finish the thought, he cut in. You are required to vacate the property within 48 hours. I froze. I'm sorry, what? This house is legally under Mr. Walker's name. There's no record of a civil union or a will naming you as a beneficiary. Ownership has passed directly to the legal heirs. They've requested immediate possession. I lived here with him for 5 years. I took care of him. I managed this house. This was my life. He sighed, like someone who had delivered this speech one too many times. I understand this is difficult. But the law is very clear. Through the front window, I saw Marcus sitting in a car parked across the street. Staring at me. Unblinking. Unashamed. Do they think I was with him for the money? I asked. That's not something I'm in a position to discuss, Ms. Joanne. I closed the door slowly. Took a deep breath. Felt a metallic taste rise in my mouth. The kind that comes just before tears or fury, or both. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. Puffy eyes. Slumped shoulders. Hair tied up like I didn't care anymore. Once again. Life was pushing me out. But this time. What rose inside me wasn't just sorrow. It was rage. And clarity. Sharp as glass. I had survived this before. But now. I was not the same woman. And for the first time, a thought came into my mind. Clear, unshakable, and cold as steel. They have no idea who they're dealing with. I grabbed my suitcase. 6 clothes, a few important papers, a crumpled photo of Samuel. And my heart, in pieces. I called Clara, a friend time had distanced. But affection had never truly let go. She didn't ask many questions. She simply said, "Come. There's always room for you here." When I arrived, the house smelled like butternut squash soup with mint. The kind of meal that hugs you before the spoon even reaches your mouth. She handed me a warm mug, looked me straight in the eyes. And asked the question I feared most. Are you really going to let this go? I lowered my head, ashamed of my own weakness. What can I do, Clara? I'm nobody. She didn't flinch. You say you're nobody. But to him, you were the most important person in the world. Clara stood, walked to an old wooden cabinet. And pulled out a beige envelope, creased, softened at the corners. My name written on it in Samuel's familiar handwriting. He left this with me. Told me to give it to you. In case you ever needed a reminder. That life doesn't end just because someone's gone. He knew. I whispered. Samuel always knew more than he let on, she said softly. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside, I found a copy of a land deed. In Peachland, a small mountain town just a few hours away. And a note, written in that slightly shaky script he had when he was tired. But always took the time to write with care. If anything happens to me, it's yours. Build what you want. Live how you need. Just, don't stop living. Please. My chest tightened. A silent cry rolled down my cheeks before I even noticed. It was as if, even after death, he was still guiding me. Peachland felt like something out of a dream. The air was lighter there. The mountains surrounded the town like invisible arms holding it still. And right in the center of the land that now belonged to me stood a half-finished wooden structure. Its windows covered in flapping plastic sheets. A sketch of a home. A place once forgotten. And now rediscovered by me. Clara came with me on that first visit. We brought a thermos of coffee. Sat on an old fallen log. And just stayed quiet. The sun was setting over Lake Okanagan. Its golden light painting the water like liquid fire. And it was there. With misty eyes and a heart still cracked down the middle. That I made a decision. The land was rough. Overgrown with weeds, scattered rocks, and echoes of someone no longer here. But at the same time, it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I stood on something that no one could take away from me. No judge. No ungrateful son. No missing piece of paper. That soil, no matter how hard or untamed, belonged to me. I spent the first days sweeping dry leaves, cleaning broken windows. And crying. Crying for all the things I'd left unsaid. Crying for all the years I accepted so little, and called it love. One morning, as I was unpacking, I found a small box tucked deep inside my suitcase. Inside it, a piece of embroidered fabric. A dish towel. One of the very first pieces I had ever taught my sewing students to make, years ago. So simple. And yet, when I touched it, something lit up inside me. I remembered the conversations around the table. The laughter tangled with grief. The teary eyes as we stitched flowers onto white cloth. It was more than thread and fabric. It was healing, woven into every straight stitch. It was a quiet way of saying, I still exist. I still matter. And right then, it became clear. I didn't just want to build a house. I wanted to rebuild women. Like me. I started with what I knew. Simple gatherings. Tea and sewing. Light conversation at first. Then, the flood. Betrayals. Abandonments. Injustices. Silences. Women like me. Discarded, erased, disrespected. That summer, I set up a fabric tent. Then, with what little I had left from my pension, I began renovating the rooms. Each brick I laid down was a part of me coming back to life. I named the project The Luminous House. The Luminous House. Because I wanted it to be a place where women dimmed by life could have a chance to shine again. In 6 months, that old wooden shell turned into a welcome room. A circle of listening. A basic finance workshop for women who had never owned a credit card. Sewing classes. Cooking lessons. Even contract reading. And 3 shared bedrooms for emergency shelter. For anyone needing to escape a house. Any house. Word got out. The town council reached out. The local radio ran a segment. And suddenly, the woman kicked out of 2 homes with no legal rights, became a reference. A name people respected. Not because I raised my voice, but because I had finally decided to exist with conviction. One autumn morning, already dressed for another session with the group, I passed the mirror in the hallway. And I stopped. Just for a moment. I looked at myself. Really looked. And for the first time in decades, I saw a whole woman. Not a shadow. Not an ex-wife. Not an almost widow. But Joanne Parker. With everything life had taken from me. And everything I had built back. Time passed. The luminous house became a safe harbor for shipwrecked women. And, without even realizing it, it became my lighthouse too. I reinvented myself. I rediscovered who I was. And for the first time in my life, I began to feel something I had never known before, respect. Then one day, I got an email. Subject, temporary housing request. Sender, Marcus Walker. It took me a few seconds to process it. Marcus. The same son who looked at me like I was a stranger at his father's funeral. The same one who sent a lawyer to kick me out of Samuel's house the very next day. I opened the message cautiously. I'm going through some financial trouble. I recently lost my job and have nowhere to stay. I heard about the project you're running. I'd like to know if there's a chance for temporary accommodation. M. For a few seconds, I laughed. A bitter laugh. But then I fell silent. I made a point of thinking carefully before responding. I waited 2 full days. And then I wrote. Marcus. We have one spot available in our housing program. Conditions. Shared accommodation. Basic meals. Mandatory contribution, 6 hours per day in volunteer activities with the group. If you accept the terms, you are welcome. Sincerely. Joanne Parker. 2 days later. He showed up. He looked completely different. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. Wrinkled clothes. He carried nothing but a backpack. And the shattered pieces of his pride. Is the space still available? The terms haven't changed, I said. He nodded. And walked through the same door. He once thought I would never have the right to enter again. In the first few weeks, Marcus barely spoke. He did the basics. Dragged chairs around with visible reluctance. Avoided my gaze. But I wasn't there to retaliate. I wasn't that broken woman anymore. I was whole. Over time, he started to observe. He saw the women who cried on my shoulder. The hugs they received, before any paperwork was signed. The stories shared in our circles. Stories full of scars that he had once helped cause. One night, after dinner, he lingered in the kitchen while I washed the dishes. His voice came low, barely a whisper. I know what I did to you. I kept scrubbing the plate. Didn't say a word. Deep down, I always knew my father loved you. But I only saw you as a threat. Someone who would take what I thought belonged to me. I took a deep breath. Dried my hands with a dish towel. And looked at him. Not with anger. But with the strength of someone who had chosen never to be fragile again. You didn't lose your father's house because of me, Marcus. You lost it because you never saw what truly mattered to him. Love. Loyalty. Care. He nodded silently. And then added. I'm trying to be a better man. But I don't know if I deserve to be here. Maybe you don't, I replied. But now you get to decide who you'll be from here on out. Just don't expect me to make it easy. He chuckled. Nervous. But relieved. He stayed for 2 more weeks. Then, he left. He pinned a note to the house bulletin board. This place taught me that dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you build. Thank you for showing me there's still time. MW. And it was that day, as I stared at that simple note pinned with a thumbtack, that I realized something. My revenge was quiet. And it was beautiful. Because it came in the form of example. Not retaliation. Today, I'm 70 years old. And for the first time in my life, I truly feel alive. I live at the luminous house with 4 incredible women. Women who, like me, were once discarded. Called dramatic. Difficult. Invisible. But here, we are seen. We are heard. We are whole. Each of us arrived carrying a different kind of pain. One lost her home to her own son. Another fled a marriage that left marks no medical exam could detect. Some showed up with no name, no direction, no self-worth. But together, we rebuilt ourselves. With affection. With freedom. I returned to something that once brought me peace. Embroidery. Thread and stitch on fabric that now tells stories. Stories of rebirth. Of scars turned into art. I film short videos for social media now. I talk about life after 60. About aging with dignity. About refusing to accept crumbs just because someone convinced us that our best years were behind us. Some people call it motivational. I call it testimony. Because there's no theory in what I share. There's pain. There's truth. And there's resilience. Life broke me. Twice. And even so, it rebuilt me. And what came out of me after all that loss is stronger, freer, and more authentic than anything I've ever been before. Today, I own few clothes. But I wear pride like a second skin. I don't have many possessions. But I have peace. And when I look in the mirror, I no longer see a faded woman. I see my best version. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're going through something hard too. Maybe you've been forgotten. Betrayed. Pushed aside. So let me say this, heart to heart. It's never too late to begin again. What you have is never too little. And it is never, ever, wrong to demand respect. You deserve more than leftovers. You deserve to be the main character of your own life. If this story touched your heart, leave a like. Share it with someone who needs this message. And tell us in the comments, what part of this story moved you the most? And if, like me, you believe that starting over at 60, 65, 70, or even 80 is possible, subscribe to her journey. Do you have a story like this? Drop it in the comments. Who knows, it might become a video here, too. Now, click on the video beside this one. And keep watching real stories of strength, courage, and fresh starts. Because your next chapter might begin with a simple play.